So my presentation is going to be about the social impacts of biodistricts, taking a perspective of rural vitality. So to give you a brief context of the scenario, why it's important to speak about social impacts, because first of all, rural areas are facing a lot of issues linked to the population. As we can see on the graph, it's showing people below 40 years old that are living in rural areas in Europe. We see Italy has decreased from 2012 to 2021 around 40%. Spain is even more, and so there are a lot of reasons why this is happening that can be regarded as the lack of services, for example, internet, the geography of the area. So most of the rural areas are located in faraway places with roads, streets that are not well maintained, and so younger generations move towards the cities where they can find better living standards. And let's say for this reason, we are trying to analyze how we can improve the situation of rural areas, analyzing positive examples. So the objectives of my investigation was to highlight why the social impacts are helping these places, especially because social impacts are not that well analyzed in general. In the research is preferred analyzing maybe environmental or economic aspects, but we would like to analyze. No, I closed here something. Here I have closed. My face is here now.
So you can.
Okay, so we try to prioritize the ideas and opinion of the local stakeholders that were living in the area, and we try to identify not only the positive aspects of areas that are considered having good standards of living, but also what are the obstacles, what is still hindering the development of rural areas. And we tried at the end, after our analysis, to develop a framework that helped to identify and analyze similar areas that have the same problems. So, first of all, we defined the concept of rural vitality. We tried to implement it starting from the concept of urban vitality, which is mostly used, for example, from Montgomery to analyze why urban areas are developing. And let's say one of the key aspects is analyzing what is the élan vital of a specific place, so its signature, why it is developing, why it is better than other places, and it considers very subjective aspects. For example, how many people are in the cafes, how many people are in the streets, if they are using the public services and amenities, and this is applied to urban context. In our case, we try to develop it only for the rural areas. Most importantly, also, we analyzed it through the concept of social innovation, which is a model of governance that is used, and in our case, it was applied to biodistricts, using it as a model that is stabilized in time and it is stable in the years. We tried to use two different examples, mainly because we wanted to see in Cilento, which is one of the case studies where it is developed with more than 20 years of experience, and in Sweden, where it is a different approach and it was freshly developed. Here are the key aspects of social innovation and also of rural vitality. It has three different perspectives. We have the social one, which analyzes the relationships between the different stakeholders, and it tries to move across the boundaries of a specific area, because biodistricts, one of their strengths is that if they are participating in broader networks, they can share their experiences if they come also from different contexts. Then there's the economic one, of course. They try to prioritize short production chains and to have a valorization of the local produce and giving it an added value. And lastly is the cultural aspects, which are usually not that well investigated, especially in contexts where there is a strong cultural and traditions in the area. And so going to the case studies that we decided to analyze, the first one is in the south of Italy, in Cilento, and we can see that this area is facing all of the characteristics that I described previously: shrinking population, small towns and villages, and it's located in two different geographical areas, because we have the coastal area with the seaside that is well visited for mass tourism, but also there's the inlands with the mountains, which is more rural and wild, and it's more difficult to reach. We had different areas of interviews: Vallo della Lucania, Ascea, San Mauro. You can see that people living there are 8,000 inhabitants until 840 as well. The second case study was in Sweden, very different environment. We can see it was mainly related to two different landscapes. One is called Sörmland, which is more rural, a lot of woods, forests, huge distances between one city and the other. And also there's the metropolitan area of Stockholm, very different, a big also place to deliver goods and products. And also culturally is very different compared to Italy, also how food production is perceived. For this reason, we tried to compare the two different scenarios. What we did is having 30 different interviewees, and we clustered them in 3 different categories based on the type of service they were providing. We had supporting actors that were involved in the logistic, maybe finance, communication inside of the biodistrict. And then we had also supporting actors, institutional actors that were working with the laws, informal regulation between all the different stakeholders, trying to highlight how to connect them and create bonds within them. And of course, there was the core value chain, which is the production process made by farmers, retailers, people working in hotel restaurants, and of course, consumers that are living in the place. We had interviews ranging from 45 to 80 minutes, asking what is their daily life, what are the main difficulties they are facing, how they try to go on, if they felt a sense of commitment, if there were specific goals they wanted to reach, in order to have a complete scenario of how it is living in this rural area. We analyzed as well documents coming from, let's say, the meetings between the biodistrict members, people that were also involved in using social network on the website, mailing list, in order to have a complete image of the situation. The data was analyzed using a software called In Vivo. We tried to define specific themes that then were clustered in specific groups in order to have a main theme with sub-themes under it. And let's say this was useful as well to have a broad idea. We had specific themes only for Italy and specific themes for Sweden, which were different, and some of them were overlapping between the two of them. To have, let's say, a short description, I tried to show the commonalities in this case. We saw to have a good rural area that is thriving with vitality. One of the most important things was motivation, and motivation was divided in 4 different categories. We thought that the commitment and sense of belonging were one of the most important ones, and they were coming, for example, from geography or history. In Italy, they were saying, oh, for us it's very important to live in this area because we want to protect specific varieties, ancient varieties that were coming from, grown from the ancient Romans, for example, or before the Green Revolution, or they were trying to protect, in Cilento there's a UNESCO National Park, they had a specific flower called Primula pallinuria, and they wanted to protect it from the climate change and using the pesticides. Also, the protection of bees was one of the elements that was perceived as very important from the population, and we see that they are one of the most endangered species, especially when we are speaking of using chemicals and pesticides. But there are also other elements linked to tradition and family. They wanted to preserve what their grandparents used to do in the ancient times and not making it get lost in time. We see that there are different elements. Also a sense of giving something for future generations, for their children, grandchildren, having a place to live which is not polluted, was seen as a very important element to commit and stay in the rural areas. Other elements that were very important were these change agents that were charismatic figures that were living in the area and had the importance to influence peers and other colleagues that were living in the area through a positive example. So, for example, they were using specific practices, agricultural practices that were not used from the neighbors, and as it happens, especially in agricultural context, the neighbors used to look at them and say, okay, maybe it is working what he is doing, I see that his production is better than mine. And so they try to exchange knowledge and information and say, okay, maybe I will start to shift to this practice. And then also there is a social aspect related to it, which is the diversity. There were a lot of examples, especially in Cilento, of people, especially the younger generation, that used to travel abroad, do maybe a completely different job, and then come back to Italy if they were going abroad, or come back to the south of Italy if they went, for example, to the north, and bring different experiences. Also coming from foreigners that were coming to Italy to live and work. These were some positive examples that could give innovation and stimulating the environment and giving it a common humus for development. In Sweden, for example, the scenario is completely different. They don't have the specific tradition of food, pursuit of quality, but instead they have to re-educate the people, because Sweden relied a lot on the imports from the external countries. They don't have also their disadvantages because their growing season is very short compared, for example, to Mediterranean countries, so it's difficult for them to have different crop varieties, and so they were trying to create a different and positive environment that enhanced the consumers to say, okay, now I understand what is this product. I can see that the quality is different compared to the ones I can find in conventional stores. I would like this element. What they had is creating a kind of food cluster that at the beginning, all of these good quality products were hard to sell for them. The only people that were looking for this kind of quality were restaurants and chefs that were looking for higher quality products. So they started with the chefs. Okay, let's sell to the chefs and create a positive circle of people that are looking for something. Then from the chefs, they would deliver it to the customers, and the customers would understand the difference from the products. Obviously, to do this kind of thing, it happens because they are living in the nearby to Stockholm. It's a big market. They have the chance to also charge higher prices, and it's a different environment. It cannot be applied to any case. But it was just to show you that there are different possibilities to develop based on the difficulties, but also on the strength of the place. Cooperation was seen as one of the most important elements. The network of relationships was made between, for example, families, peer workers, neighbors. All together, they tried to collaborate and create exchanges. In order to these places for exchanges to happen, it was important to have a place where this could happen. And it was seen especially in the fairs. For example, in Cilento, they are very linked to these traditions. So they have fairs when they harvest the figs. They have fairs for the harvest of wheat. They have fairs in general for a lot of events, and it's a reason for the community to gather, to meet, discuss, and also tourists are attracted to these specific places in rural areas which are not the common ones that you can find in the seaside, which is usually very easy to attract a specific type of tourism. In this way, they attract a more responsible tourist that wants to learn and discover the traditions of the place, what was done in the ancient times.
Can you finish in 2 minutes?
In 2 minutes, I will try my best. And so they create relationships between producer and consumer, but also between producer and producer. This type of relationships strengthen different elements, which can be, for example, the creation of new products, if we are speaking of producers, because, for example, I have wheat and the producer instead is doing has an oven and wants to need wheat to the flour, sorry, to produce a specific bread, a specific kind of dough for the pizza, and all of these elements come together. And also between producers and consumers, because consumers go to the local bakery and they ask, for example, okay, I have problems with gluten, I cannot tolerate a specific kind of thing. Do you have this type of biscuit? And so they would come and exchange information, and this way they develop new products. And what is useful also to develop new selling strategies. The advantage of Cilento is that they have this huge cooperative that clusters around 1,000 organic producers. Most of them maybe they are not certified, but still they come together and they have a common platform to sell their goods, online platform. In Sweden the same, they use Facebook groups to sell their products. So there are different strategies of coming together. But obviously there are still obstacles in the development of biodistricts. Bureaucracy was seen as one of them. Also, it's difficult to have people coming together on a long run. There are fragmentation. People want to prioritize, for example, a specific place more than another. They want to put the market in this city or town instead of another one. The most challenging thing is to keep a vision that is on the long run for many years. In Cilento, they are doing it thanks to the cooperative that gathers a lot of people together. In Sweden, they are trying to do this with the food cluster, with the chefs. And also another really important thing is communication. What is done, especially from the local people that are living there, was not perceived that much. More from tourists or people that were looking for that specific thing. But people living there had to face things saying, oh, I don't know what the biodistrict is, I don't know what their activities are. And this is because there is not a great communication also for the people living there, because maybe they already grow their crops or they want something that is less expensive, and for this reason they don't look at products coming from the organic districts, which of course have higher prices. So to go very fast, at the end we designed this framework that had two different levels, one individual, one of community. Individual level analyze the impacts of this from the social level, more related to general frameworks as SAFA, the link to well-being, health and safety on the work, and a lot of elements, while community analyzed all of these networks, what we analyzed in our interviews, how they develop new technologies, how they develop knowledge, how they share information to overcome the challenges. So we'll conclude, sorry for going very fastly. It was very important to have this leadership that brings the actors together and creates a critical mass of people that can have a shared vision, and this shared vision has to be maintained on the long run, because, for example, in Germany they have biodistricts that are created top-down because there is funding, but once the funding ends, these biodistricts collapse. So it's important really to create a vision that is kept on the long run in order to make it effective. So, gracias. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Giacomo. Creo que, bueno, se ha visto que tiene dos ejemplos reales de biodistritos en funcionamiento de sitios tan diferentes como Suecia y Italia, o el sur de Italia, que aún más contraste, pues puede dar unos resultados coherentes sobre los impactos sociales de los biodistritos. de momento para la tesis en Bolonia, ¿no? Y después dejamos las preguntas para el final, si os parece.